Thank you very much. So yeah, it's good. It's good that my students are not here because I actually gave this talk to them last week, so it doesn't make any sense. So I'm here to talk about exclusive design, and this exclusive design talk is in large about disability. So I think I should start with two different definitions of disability. You have the medical definition, and the medical definition says disability is an anomaly, and this is something that we should fix. Now, an example of a medical approach to disability would be glasses, right? Your eyesight gets worse, you buy glasses, you fix the anomaly, and you're less disabled. So it's the you put the problem at the individual level and the solution. Now, there's a more interesting approach to disability, or more interesting definition, I think, which is the social definition of disability, which says disability is an interaction between the individual and society, and it's a complicated interaction. Now, in the case of eyesight, you could say instead of buying glasses, we just use a bigger font, right? So this would be a different approach. Another good example, of course, is now imagine you're in a wheelchair and the only way you can move around is in a heavy wheelchair, and you reach the end of the curb. Now, all of a sudden, you're very disabled because your wheelchair might fall down the curb and there's just no way to go on. So that's why we have lowered curbs, right? So this is a social solution to disability, and now all of a sudden you're not disabled because you can just drive down the curb and continue on your road. So I think the social definition is a much more interesting approach to disability. So now that we have that out of the way, let's start with the web. I like the web. I really, really like the web, and that's why I work for the web. And that's why I teach about the web. And I always try to illustrate my love for the web with this illustration. This was in one of the books by Smashing Magazine. It's an illustration by Mike Cuss. We really liked this illustration, so we decided to paint it on one of the walls in our house. And then it looks like this, right? Looks quite nice. I hadn't asked Mike Cuss if I can use this illustration. I just did it. But I thought, okay, I have to thank him somehow. So I decided to make, of course, a website with this illustration. So with web technology, I created a web page, put it on a domain, and gave the domain to Mike Cuss. And then it looks like this. I can just leave this on for you, and I'm sure some of you are still stoned from last night. You'll love this. Now, the reason why I like the web is because it can do this thing, right? It can change to different contexts. It can change from the context of a large screen to a smaller screen. And there are many more contexts. So, for instance, the older developers among you might remember there are some browsers that don't support border radius. So here I use, of course, CSS border radius to create circles. What should this illustration look like when you don't have border radius support, right? Well, I decided it should look like this. This is Opera Mini, and you can read the illustration, right? You can read the text, but I give you the colors. Now, if you're really lucky and you have an even older browser, i.e. 7 or something like that, then you can even imagine the colors. Now, if you're a good illustrator, you can even come up with a more beautiful illustration, right? This works. But these are different contexts. The context of old browsers or browsers with fewer features. But the really interesting part here is that this illustration can now be read out loud to people who cannot see. So if you have a screen reader, it may sound like something like balls, 2 connected balls, a blue ball, a red ball, etc., etc., etc. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? So that's why I really, really like the web. And the reason why it works this way is because it was designed to work this way. It is designed to work for everyone. This is one of its core principles, right? This is for everyone. The web should work. Doesn't really matter what kind of hardware you use. You don't need expensive phones. You don't need an expensive computer. It should work on all kinds of hardware and all kinds of input, all kinds of output. Now, this is an interesting thing. So what does for everyone mean exactly? Well, it means two things, I think. Probably means more things, but at least these things. It means everyone can use it, but it also means everyone is allowed to publish on it. And here is a paradox, I think. Everybody's paradox. Everyone can use it only if every maker is an expert. Now, this illustration I showed you, it's not very easy to make this. I mean, I couldn't have made this 15 years ago when I was, well, 20, I don't know, I'm pretty old. 20 years ago when I started with the web, I wouldn't have known how to make this thing that works in all contexts. And can we even imagine all contexts? There's so many contexts. So if we only want to make websites that are truly inclusive, then we cannot allow everybody to just publish on the web. And if we don't allow everybody to publish on the web, it's not the web anymore and it stops being interesting. So it's a paradox. It's just what we have to work with. I'm not going to give you the solution. You just have to fix this yourselves. But one approach that we can use is, of course, inclusive design, right? And there are many definitions of inclusive design. During my master's research that I just finished, I found this definition, and it says to consider all contexts. It starts with that. And what do they mean? Well, here they mean think about all the different people, all the different ways that they may interact with your website, all the different hardware and software that they may be using. And design for all these people. Think of all these contexts when you design stuff. The second one, be consistent. That's interesting. Here they say, use the patterns that people know, right? If people know that a navigation is always at the top, put the navigation at the top, because then the people know where to find it, that they don't have to look for it. Prioritize content. It's a bit of a form follows function thing. Makes sense. It's almost too logical, I think. Not sure if it's a good principle. And the last one, the same, add value. Sure, we don't want to remove value with our website, right? It's of course you want to add value. Well, a good way to test if principles are good principles, and you should do this, right? If your art director comes up and they say, we have this set of design principles, then one of the ways to test if they are good design principles is flip them. So I flipped these principles and then they turned into this. Instead of considering all contexts, it says now study situation. Instead of being consistent, we should ignore conventions and prioritize identity. And my favorite, of course, is add nonsense. And when I looked at these principles, I said, well, this is what we have been doing for 20 years for ourselves, right? As web designers, we have been designing for web designers, if we're honest. And we're really, really good at it. We have studied our own situation for years, and we know exactly how we use our computers and our browsers. We have been ignoring all kinds of conventions and making all kinds of novel stuff for ourselves that we love, right? We have used our identity, and our identity is just all over the web. Our identity as web designers. And there's, of course, all kinds of nonsense because, well, it's not just us. There's also marketeers on the web, and there's all kinds of crap out there. So we've been doing this for ourselves. And I thought, what would happen if we do this for people we have been ignoring for quite a while? So what, and the thing is, how can we consider all contexts if we don't know all contexts? Because do we really know how somebody uses the web when they're blind? Well, I had read a few books about it and a few articles about it, but if I'm really honest, I hadn't tested with a real person who is blind in reality, right? I had seen some live keynotes of people showing their superpowers with screen readers, but I thought there's so much to study there. There's so much we don't know, and we can assume that we're not as good at designing for them as we are for me. So should we be consistent if we don't know if these patterns that we use, if they even work for these people that we've been excluded? So it makes sense to ignore conventions when you start designing for people you don't know or for contexts that you don't know, because there are no conventions. Prioritize identity. Well, it's interesting to use the identity of people you have excluded, right? It's interesting to have a different approach to identity and use that to come up with new ideas. And well, adding nonsense is just a really good idea because there's so much seriousness anyway, and we can have some fun. That's a good reason. And the other reason is it makes sense in a brainstorming way that if you design and you don't allow nonsense, then you will only come up with things you already know. And if you allow nonsense, and if you really ask people to talk about their nonsense, their nonsensical ideas, then it may turn out that these ideas are not that nonsensical after all. Many examples of that. So it's a good brainstorming tool. So I've been using this set of principles, and well, let's do as I preach. Ignore conventions and start with the second item in this list. Ignoring conventions. So why should we ignore conventions? Well, one of the reasons is because the defaults suck, right? The things that are there, the things that we have been doing, or the things how browsers work, for instance, are they really good? Are they that well designed? Well, not always. Here's are a few examples. So for instance, I showed you this. And then I showed you the IE7 version of the illustration. And then I told you in a poetic voice how a screen reader would tell you that this page sounds, but it doesn't really sound that way. What the screen reader really does, it says, Balls, web content, this document has no links and 34 headings. Heading level 1, balls, heading level 1, 2 connected balls, heading level 1, a blue ball, group 3 items, heading level 1, a blue ball, group 3 items, group 7 items. What? That's not at all the thing that I've been designing, right? It's completely something else. It's a horrible experience. Ooh, imagine having to browse the web. Every page sounds like this. Ooh. Okay, so if it's up to me, we can ignore this. Then there's another one. Now, I'm not saying that the WCAG is something that we should ignore. On the contrary, I think there's a lot of knowledge in this document. It's just the way that we use it is something that we should reconsider. Right? So how do we use the WCAG? We use it as an after-the-fact checklist. So we've designed a beautiful website for me. Well, thank you very much. Then we've built it. Now it works really well for me. And then we ask an accessibility expert to do an audit. And they say, well, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And you should fix it. And then it goes as a bug list to a developer on a probably a time constraint, and they just fix it technically. Now, what you get then is, if it's up to me, it's not even accessibility, it's theoretical accessibility. So in theory, it should work. And if you really must, you will be able to do most of the stuff with the screen reader. But it's completely unacceptable from our point of view. So I think we should use the WCAG as a design tool and not as a bug list generator. Okay. And then there's browsers. So here, for instance, if you don't are not able to use a mouse, you probably use your keyboard to navigate through focusable items. Well, here is a long list of music, and I can tab through it. And here you see the focus thing. Where is it? It's behind the status bar. This has been this way for over 100 years, and nobody has ever fixed it. So yes, the defaults suck, and this is not something that we should accept, and we have to work on that. So let's keep on working on tabbing. So I've invited a few friends of mine with various disabilities to come over to our school, and our students have been designing for them, designing different interfaces, specifically so tailor-made for these people. So it's not a design for all people who have motor disabilities, but specifically for this one person. So this friend of mine, Marijn, he came over, severely motor disabled, but a very, very clever programmer. And so he absolutely knows his way around the computer. So we assumed, well, he cannot use his mouse, so he will probably use the tab key. So we created interfaces for him to use with his tab key. So here is the same list of music, but now with some styling. And instead of the focus thing ending up here, the focus thing stays in the middle, and I've added some animation and some color because I like animations and colors. Well, here comes Marijn, and he starts testing my interface, and it looks like this. It turns out Marijn never uses the tab key. Now, there are several reasons why he never uses the tab key, but he just never. So all our assumptions about how do people use our website when they don't use the mouse, well, I don't know if they're true. Well, they're at least not true for Marijn. So how does he use? He uses his arrow keys. And well, with arrow keys, you can make a nice interface as well. So this is how the interface works with the arrow keys. It's much better than using a mouse or a tab key, if you ask me. So this is tailor-made for Marijn. And this can only be done by studying situation, right? And I didn't know this situation. I just assumed that everybody who doesn't use a mouse, they use the tab key. And this is exactly what I lie to my students. I tell them, no, he probably uses a tab key. And then they do the first test and all their interfaces don't work. It's a very good way of testing, and it's a very good lesson for them. Because before that, they had tested, because they have to test their work. But who do they test with? Well, with the students who's next to them. And they ask them, do you like my work? They say, yeah, sure. Yeah, looks good. Or they ask their parents, Mommy, Daddy, what does do you like my work? Oh, wow, did you make that? That's fantastic. That's testing. And if we're honest, I remember from when I worked at an agency, that was testing for us as well, right? We always found an excuse to not really test thoroughly. Okay, so we should be testing and we should not assume stuff. Here's another one I did. This is for Simon Dogger. Simon is a blind designer from Eindhoven, a product designer, physical product designer. So not digital designer, he makes physical products. And like many designers, he wants to do research, and he wants to use the 2Doc websites. This is a website of all the Dutch documentaries in the Netherlands. It's a very, very interesting resource for doing research, but also for just wasting your time. And he had never been able to use this website. Now, for us, it looks like this, and I tried to make a visual representation of what it looks like to Simon. For him, all kinds of crap is added to the page. And he really asked me, why do you designers add heading level 2 and heading level 4 at random places in your document? He didn't know that his screen reader did that. Now, he's not an advanced computer user. He's just a casual user. And so he didn't know, he didn't understand, he didn't know what a heading level is. This is, of course, something that we know as web developers, but he didn't know that. That was quite a shock. But, well, it doesn't look really good, but the worst thing is it starts with this sentence. So he opens the page and it says, this page has 80 heading elements and 150 links. And you're looking for one of these links, and I'm not going to tell you where it is. Good luck. This is horrible. And he had never been able to find this one single link that he was looking for, the into the archive where you could browse the archive. He had never been able to find that link. Because to him, actually, it sounds like this. All the elements get this extra crap added, and all the elements start shouting, click on me, I'm the most important thing here. No, I'm more important, click on me, give me attention. He hates the web. This actually pains me that we have created something with the idea that it's there for everyone, but when you look at it, we actually created this horrible monster that he really, really hates. So, I think the reason why is because there's too much bullshit on that web page. It's just filled and filled and filled with crap. So, the first thing is to just read this article by Brad Frost again. This was in the age of responsive design, and he said, okay, remove all the crap because then it's much easier to make a website responsive. Well, remove even more crap and it's easier to make it accessible to everybody. There's just so much crap out there. So I did a redesign, and this is what the website looks like for Simon. This is a tailor-made version of this exact same website where I removed everything that's not necessary. Well, there's quite a lot that turns out to be not necessary. And here it is. It says, I'll keep it short. On this page, you can browse documentaries via themes, makers, or locations. He had never found these entryways. He didn't know that you could browse the archive through themes. Now he knows, and now he can use it. So you browse through themes, and then you come to these sub-collections, and then all of a sudden you end up on this web page. Well, and here is the movie. Those of you who can see, you can see a very big blue button with a triangle on it. Simon did end up every now and then at one of these pages, but he had never been able to play the movie. Because what do you think that the play button sounds like? Anybody? What would you label it? Play, right? Or play button, maybe? Something like that. But what does it sound like? It sounds like Q. Q? Yes, the letter Q. So if he just asks his screen reader to read the whole document, it starts reading everything, and then all of a sudden you hear Q, and then it just goes on. Because it's not a button, sure, it's a div with an on-click. He had never been able to play a movie on this page. It's ridiculous, of course. There's many silly technical mistakes, but this is maybe even active exclusion. So that's why I added this very big yellow button which says play. It's very big because he cannot see it. He's blind, and I like big yellow buttons. So that's purely for me. Didn't even tell him. And then you click that button and then it says, I'm sorry, you cannot play it because you need Flash to play this movie. I cannot fix everything. Well, most of the movies nowadays are not in Flash, but sometimes you still get this message. But as you saw, this was a pretty boring website, right? It's purely functional. There's no identity in it. It's just, I removed all the crap. It works, and that's it. So I wanted to use identity. Now, here's another person I worked with, Hannes Walraven. Hannes is a very famous Dutch photographer. Well, he used to be a Dutch photographer until 15 years ago he turned blind. well, what do you do as an artist if you cannot see anymore? Well, he started making audio collages. So he walks around the city, records all kinds of sounds, puts them together, and makes his art in that way. And he wanted to let me hear one of these collages on his own website. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So again, this is a blind person who uses a screen reader, and he's not a nerd, right? He uses his computer if he has to. So this is what that looks like.
Site-namen. Geluidinzicht. Geluidinzicht maakt ruimte tactiel en auditief beleefbaar. Pagehas. 89 links. 25 headings. 9 vormcontrols. 10 landmarks. SER web area articles count multi. Visited link image. Geluidinzicht. Link. Audiomaquette. Link. Ontstaansgeschiedenis. Link. Meerwaarde audiomaquette. Link. Nieuwe gebouwen. Link. Rondleidingen. Link. Rondleidingen voor groepen. Link. Luisterdagen. Visited link. Geluid en beeld. Link. Archief. Link. Contact en colofon. Visited link. Geluidsprojecten. Geluidsprojecten, geluid en zichtpagehas.
Now he wants to click on this triangle.
21 headings. 33 vormcontrols. 10 landmarks. 1 artikel. Visited link image. Geluidinzicht. Link. Audiomaquette. Link. Ontstaansgeschiedenis. Link. Meerwaarde audiomaquette. Link. Nieuwe gebouwen. Link. Rondleidingen. Link. Rondleidingen voor groepen. Link. Luisterdagen. Visited link. Geluid en beeld. Link. Archief. Link. Contact en colofon. Visited link. Geluidsprojecten. Audioplayer web application with 6 items. Play button.
Doe eens je ogen dicht. Wat zie je nu?
Niks.
En wat denk je, wat is het als je blind wordt? Wat zie je dan?
Niks.
In reality, it was much worse because he clicked through all these links. And this is actually, I've seen presentations before of blind people, and they have this superpower of listening at extremely high speed to web pages. Well, these are trained nerds who use their computer all day. So normal people, they're a bit slower. So this was how he uses his screen reader in reality. So he came to this link and he thought, this is the link I need. So he clicked on it. And then he went through the whole menu. And then after a long time, he found out, oh no, this is probably not the page I need. So he went back all over again. And then he ended up finally, and I was sitting next to him. Oh, I cannot help you. I'm observing here. And then instead of clicking on the play button, somehow he clicked on another button and a modal dialog opened, and it asked him, do you want to download this file called, what's it called? Doe je ogen eens dicht, 3 final version .mp3. He didn't know what was going on. He just didn't understand it at all. And how do you think he solved this problem? By restarting his computer. That was the only way out of this dialogue for him. Such a horrible experience. So good. I can redesign this. I think I can do this better. So that's what I did. This is the redesigned version I made specifically for him. I said, let's put this on its own domain. It deserves its own domain. Your audio files are nice. I used a little bit of his identity, right? He's a very, very nice person, very friendly. So that's why I used a friendly font. He can still see a little bit out of the corner of his eyes, so I used high contrast. His photography used to be very, very colorful, so that's why I use colors. But that's it. It's still a little bit of a boring website, right? It's not very exciting to look at, but it does work, and there's no way that that button does anything else than play or pause. That's just the simplest audio player, and I think the best audio player out there. It just works. So I asked him, is there any nonsense that you haven't told me? Are there any ideas that you think are too nonsensical to ask me to do for you? Because I had been working on this for a few weeks. I came around his house for a few times, and I wanted to go on to add an extra layer of experience for him. And he said, yes, actually, I do have this nonsensical idea. I want you to make, for every audio object, I want you to make a small, funny animation. An animation? You cannot see the animation. How do you make invisible animations? Well, it doesn't really say in the WCAG how you do that. So, but it does say that when you have graphics, you should create a textual alternative. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because I'm designing for a blind person here. I shouldn't start with the graphics. I should start with a text version and then make a visual alternative. That's what I did. And that turned out to be actually a pretty clever way of prototyping anyway, because writing an animation is not that much work, but making an animation, that's hours and hours of work. So if you want to test an animation, find a blind person and ask if this is funny. So here's one of the animations that I made for Hannes, which is about the ferries of Amsterdam, and it sounds like this.
Ha, look at that. Two ferries are ferrying from one side of the screen to the other, bouncing, boing, 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 against the sides of the browser.
Now, this was the first time. Do you hear? It's so neutral. The voices are so boring. And this was the first time that this very neutral, boring voice said, boing, 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 boing. What? Well, he was laughing, of course. It was just hilarious. So, yeah, it worked, right? So then I went on and made the animation. Those of you who've ever been to from Central Station to Noord in Amsterdam with the ferry, they know, yeah, it does feel a little bit like that. And they do bounce boing, 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 boing at the side of the river. So that's what this one looks like. Then there's another one, an animation about a hammer. And that sounds like this.
So funny. All of a sudden there's a hammer that slowly ticks the text to the right.
That was the first time he heard his screen reader giggle. He didn't know that screen readers could giggle. Well, they can. This is what the animation looks like. This is the second version. I started with ticking it to the right. Well, it turns out it's easier to tick it down a little bit. So it doesn't matter. He cannot see it anyway. So this brought me up to this idea where I said, okay, I made this one screen reader giggle. At first, I made it for his screen reader, which is in Dutch. So first, I used this string here, which says, which is really, really good, right? This sounds exactly like you want a screen reader to giggle. But what does it sound like in English? It says, ga, 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 which is something else. I don't know what it is, but it's not giggling. So I tried different things, and that one works pretty well in English. That was the one you heard. So I decided to make this international database of giggle strings for screen readers. And I thought, oh, I'll just make that in a weekend. It turns out that's pretty hard to do because there's lots of database stuff, and I don't know how that works. I actually asked my students if they wanted to make this project, but nobody chose this project. I don't know why. But it's a good idea, I guess. So, right, you could just add a string and then somebody else could test the string, and then you know if this also works in French or in whatever, in Scottish.
Boing, 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 boing. Boing, boing,
So-
boing, boing.
Right. It's so easy, right? There's not much design for screen readers. So whatever you do, it's better than what's out there. So it's very rewarding as well. So I should advise you, if you're a bit fed up with making websites because they all look the same and they're boring, start designing for screen readers. It's so rewarding. So what's next? I have been teaching and I will keep on teaching. So there will be more education. One of the things that I often hear from accessibility experts is that there are no designers and developer with good accessibility knowledge. And I think this is true, right? We have very many people with a little bit of technical skills to make something theoretically accessible, but there are almost no designers who design for accessibility. So this is something that I'm actively promoting into our own education. So we're putting accessibility into the different courses that we give. So it's not a separate course. It's something that we try to integrate in the design education. But we're also working on a new master program. So it's a new school that we're setting up. And the idea is that the government in the Netherlands, actually new websites for the government, they have to be accessible. Now, I was discussing this yesterday with a few people, and I asked, now imagine that all governments took this seriously, right? That all municipalities from Amsterdam to, just name a small town, Castricum, whatever, that they said, yes, our websites have to be accessible, truly accessible, and they take it seriously. Are there enough developers and designers who can do that? I don't believe it. There's just nobody who can do that. There's a handful of organizations who know how to do that. But if everybody took it seriously, no way. We have a big problem because in 5 years' time, all e-commerce websites have to be accessible. Well, if we cannot get our government to be accessible, where do we find the people who know how to make websites, all these e-commerce websites accessible? There's a big problem there. We need designers and we need highly skilled designers to be able to get this going. So that's why I think we need a master program that's focused on accessibility to fix this lack of design expertise. Then there's also the problem of the fact that our educational institutions are not accessible. It's just horrible to see that people who are blind are not able to finish school. I think I feel so ashamed when I see them leaving. That's horrible. And I think if we have a master program, maybe we can inspire other schools, other design schools and art schools to add a little bit of accessibility into their program as well, right? So that's why I need a master, but I can also use your help here. Because to sell this idea to my bosses and their bosses within the huge University of Applied Sciences, I have to convince them. So I need a business case. So I need people who can tell me from their organization, yes, indeed, we need these kinds of designers, highly skilled designers to help us out. So if you have, you can email me, I'll show you my email address later, with these kinds of quotes and help me out here. That would be very, very much appreciated because I really think I should sell this to our university and we should start this program as soon as possible. So that's the master idea. And then, well, that's it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Hi, 1, 2, yes, I'm here. Wonderful. That was really, really informative. Right, we have Slido, as we said at the beginning. At the moment, we haven't got any questions in Slido, so if you have questions, because it was so concise that no one's got any questions. Yeah. That's why. So if anyone in the room or anyone around the world has any questions, give us a shout. I've got a couple while we're waiting for some.
Good.
Let me just bring them up. Yes. So on the ha 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 ga 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 screen that we had that you showed, which was you were essentially trying to get the way it sounds to sound like a laugh.
Yeah.
Is that not affected by the screen reader settings of the user, and are you able to force them the settings?
Yes. So it depends on the voice that you use. So some strings, they sound just very good with a certain Dutch voice, but they sound horrible with another Dutch voice. So I guess this is something that I was trying to document in this I think that if you use this screen reader with this voice, then it sounds like a giggle string. Yeah.
Because otherwise it could sound like something
Yeah, yeah.
completely irrelevant and throw the context, I
But
imagine.
probably funny as well. But yeah, it's not giggling.
Excellent. The other thing I wanted to ask as well is that you said, so you were talking about starting with text and then adding the visual elements later. Can that not be equated to sort of lo-fi to hi-fi prototyping?
Yeah,
so that's
it's
how we should be designing.
Yeah, of course, it's a similar way. But it just got there because of this nonsensical approach. Yeah.
Still no Slidos, unless
No questions.
Maybe here we are. Excellent. This is from the room. Where do I get started with accessibility design? What software would you recommend for testing if you don't know anybody with disabilities?
Well, you should start with a screen reader. There's on your iOS, there is VoiceOver. On your Mac, there's VoiceOver. You can just activate it and just get lost because it's horrible at the beginning. But start using it. You really should. On Windows, there's JAWS, which is pretty expensive, really expensive actually. You could buy a completely new MacBook instead of buying JAWS. But there's also NVDA, which is free and open source, so you can adjust that. So you should really just install these kinds of things and start working with it. Another thing is just throw away your mouse for a while and try to use your applications with keyboard only, which is a very interesting example to or a thing to do. But really the best thing is to just approach either people with disabilities or organizations who represent people with disabilities. They're probably happy to help you out with finding people who want to test your applications. And then ask for non-nerds because they're more interesting, I think.
We have another one. This is from Anonymous. How do we avoid the heading being read, and is this even possible?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. So when I returned from Eindhoven, the first time I met Simon Dogger, I was actually, my whole view of the web just crumbled. And I was really, really reconsidering me being a teacher and teaching about the web, because I thought I've been teaching my students for years now that they should use semantics because people with screen readers need them. And then I met this guy who hates semantics. He says, turn it off. I was completely confused. So the application that I made for him, right, the alternative version of the 2Doc website, there's no semantics in it, and he loves it. But then I sent this website to a nerdy friend of mine who's blind, and he hates the application because there's no semantics in it. He has no way to find his way around the website the way he's used to do that, right? His way of navigating is gone. So this is a very complicated question. I don't think the answer is not using semantics. That would be a very bad idea. I think a better solution would be to redesign how screen readers work. For instance, the default settings shouldn't be that they read out all semantics, because that doesn't make any sense to people who don't know what semantics are. So the default setting should be read nothing, just the content. And then when you're a nerd and you know where to find the settings, because that's pretty hard if you're blind, you should try that. Try to change the verbosity of your screen reader without looking at the screen. This is really, really hard to do. So once you're an advanced user and you want the semantics, then maybe, or the chances are higher that you know to change the settings of your screen reader as well. So I think there should be some UX design and some UX reconsiderations from the tooling part there. And this is not something that we as designers or web developers can solve. And we should definitely not remove semantics. Okay.
We're going to have one more quick question. This is great. Could we use emojis to mark up for screen readers or a different markup?
I don't really know what emojis sound like. Do you know? This probably sound, yeah? Okay, so it could be, but it's not as funny as right?
Okay, that was quick. So one extra quick one. How do we avoid the heading? Oh no, sorry, we just done that one. Sorry. How are governments and schools working to make their sites accessible? Are they hiring developers or working with specific agencies? And what is the progress in a nutshell?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not a specialist on this field. I don't work at an agency anymore. So as I understand it, lots of it is done just by different smaller agencies. And it says when they hire them, the website has to be accessible. And then when the website is done, they ask them, is the website accessible, right? And then they say, yes, sure. And I say, well, fantastic. Thank you very much. So I don't think there's very much validation and not very much user testing and definitely not much designing there.
Not enough anyway.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Give it up for Vasilis.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, really informative. Thank you.